We've grown to know each other. We've grown to enjoy each other's company. We'll go to lunch together. We'll say hello. I just love this group of people.
So here we've been talking about Chattanooga history around Christmases, and yet we really did not begin at the beginning, Linda, with the establishment of the cemetery, National Cemetery.
So, I think so often here in Chattanooga we look at the houses of faith, and yet at the same time we look at the Chattanooga National Cemetery and consider it to be such a sacred site. You walk through those gates or drive through those gates, you look at Monument Hill, you look at the cemetery, and I wonder if people know the history of the cemetery and know that it was chartered Christmas Day of 1863.
I can tell you the answer is no, because what you see in your own backyard, you tend to overlook.
You do, and you think about Chattanooga's significance during the American Civil War, and most historians agree the Civil War for this nation was the most pivotal point, because when you're involved in foreign wars, it's one thing, but when you have brother against brother, father against son, those wounds take so long to heal. Chattanooga was so important to the Union's plan of victory. When Winfield Scott sat down and drew out the Anaconda Plan and came up with 4 or 5 points, blockading the South, cutting off the Deep South, he identified Chattanooga prior to the war even starting as the spot the Union had to take because of the railroads, the river, access into the Deep South. You could go into the Deep South and do exactly what Sherman did from here. So the battles for Chattanooga in 1863 beginning in Chickamauga in September, and then the Union pulls back to Chattanooga in November, just prior to Thanksgiving of 1863. The battles that occurred here on the ridge at Brown's Ferry on top of Lookout Mountain, Orchard Knob, when those battles were over, General Grant, whose headquarters was here in Chattanooga, recognized the need for a ground where the soldiers who had lost their lives could be buried. 25,000 casualties at Chickamauga in 3 days of fighting. Thousands of casualties here in the Chattanooga region, and it is Grant, Sherman, and Thomas who identified Chattanooga as the site for a national cemetery, the first one being Arlington in Robert E. Lee's Rose Garden, and they choose the spot that we have today.
And yet, am I right? Because I know that in the terms of the national park that is here, it's one park, but it's different places.
It is different places, and it's Chickamauga Chattanooga National Military Park, the oldest national military park in the nation.
Okay.
As a military park in the National Park Service, we're older than Gettysburg because they remained independent for a long time.
So the 25,000 who died in Chickamauga, for example.
Well, 25,000 casualties, not all died, but those including the deaths and those who are left with permanent disabilities.
Okay, so but the ones who lost their lives in Chickamauga, were they buried?
They were eventually reburied here at the Chattanooga National Cemetery.
Union and Confederate?
Union and Confederate, and you will see that there are a number, probably 3,000 to 4,000, that say unknown soldier. Because we didn't have as good of a system of identifying bodies at that point.
Was there a reason that it happened to be on Christmas Day?
It's just when the paperwork all got done, but I think there was a divine reason for it.
Well, I think it's interesting to think now when everything shuts down on Christmas Day, then the war was going on, there was no pause.
There was no pause, and the documents are signed on Christmas Day.
When you and I were talking about Armistice Day in 1918, I love this story of World War I and the singing of Silent Night. I don't know if it's really true or not.
Oh, it is. It's true. Because I've had, when our World War veterans were still alive, we would interview sometimes, and they would talk about being in foxholes at that point.
It's trench warfare.
Trench warfare, the poisonous gases and everything. And then the silence and hearing the German soldiers beginning to sing it in German, but knowing that it was Silent Night that we knew, there's something about the humanity of individuals that in a moment when you don't know the opposition. You know, the poems of World War I are just fascinating. You have that same sort of sentiment in the American Civil War. You are doing the bidding of your nation. There are reasons why wars occur, but in those moments of quiet, it's simply people talking to people and realizing what a common background in many ways they share.
Right. So if you were to go to the cemetery over the course of these next days, you'll still see the wreaths, right?
You will. They will be there until early January. And, you know, our goal is that at some point there'll be a wreath on every grave. And Chattanooga's National Cemetery is one of the larger ones, 49,600 plus graves in that cemetery. Every one of those, someone who served their nation.
Before I let us run, are the gates locked though, or can you go?
You can. You're encouraged not to go in after sunset. That's a Southern tradition with cemeteries. That the gates are always open, and you know, you walk in, and when the wreaths are out, especially if only it would snow, that would make it even more beautiful.
Right.
But you come into the cemetery and you see those wreaths, and it is our pledge to those men and women and their family members that we still honor their sacrifice and their service. And what a visible way of being able to do that. You know, it's a thank you in greenery and red bows.
Well, we're going to come back after this commercial break, and we'll talk a little bit of our own memories of Christmas and maybe throw a bit more history in as well. I love our pretend fireside chat, Linda Mines.
Oh, love it.
We're back after this.
More local stories from across the Tennessee Valley. Local 3 News. Coverage you can count on.
No two sets of eyes are the same.